Production funding for Another View comes from the Hampton Citizens Unity Commission, using the time, talents, and skills of a broad base of citizen volunteers to help break down racial and cultural barriers, working to achieve the City of Hampton's community plan for a healthy, diverse community. And from the African American Programming Advisory Group, community visionaries assisting WHRO to engage, enlighten, educate, and entertain all communities in Hampton Roads. And now, Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. Foreclosure, the legal means your lender can use to repossess your home. Foreclosures are on the rise nationwide and right here in Hampton Roads. On the south side alone last year, the number of foreclosures rose from about 400 to 1,000 homes. This year, Newport News experienced a 29% increase in foreclosures between January and February. The media image of the homeowner in foreclosure is a minority who, quote, knew they couldn't afford the home in the first place and used subprime mortgages to get their piece of the American dream. But is that the true image? Who finds themselves in foreclosure? How do you avoid it if you've had a life-changing event? How do we turn things around? Joining us to discuss foreclosures is Yvette Young, Vice President of the Urban League, and Tina Lea, Mortgage Loan Representative with State Farm Bank. Welcome to the program, ladies. How are you?
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for joining us. Yvette, I know this is a peeve of yours, this image of the person who finds themselves in foreclosure. Is it the minority who just kind of took advantage of the system at the time?
No, it's not, and that's really a misconception. It's really something that we stress building wealth on a home, and so once that person bought the home, it was something that they were just trying to achieve for their families. I think that the misconception is really just that. I often hear that they knew what they were signing and they knew that they couldn't afford the house, but that's not always the case, because when we migrate through the paperwork, we find that it is very complex, sometimes even finding what the deal really was. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I don't think that that's really a true picture of what's happened in some of the African-American families or minority families that find themselves in this situation.
Tina, now you're from the banking perspective.
Yes.
You do mortgages all the time. Is it because people just are less educated about how to get a mortgage and exactly what they're signing? What's going on with it that we find ourselves in such trouble now?
It's sort of a combination. Education is the key, and really in the last few years with the last few administrations, the emphasis, as Yvette has said, it's been on wealth and ownership. But part of that comes from home buyer education, and when you think about it, many families did not have that wealth and that education before. They weren't homeowners. They didn't know the process. They didn't know what it took to qualify. They weren't comfortable with the system in terms of asking the right questions. And so that's part of it in terms of a comfort level, I think, along with the education process, and to also have a peer or a family member that can say, we went through this process before, know that you should have these rights, ask these questions, let me review this document with you. Many times they don't have that support system, and so they really rely on their lenders to be honest and upfront with them, and they kind of go with an assumption that they've been told everything up front, that perhaps they can just sort of breeze through the paperwork without really reading the fine print, because they really assume that the professional has already shared that emphasis with them. And of course the onus is on the consumer.
Now I know we have some charts. One is of the number of homes that have gone into foreclosure in Virginia, and over the past several years. And that number just continues to rise, unfortunately. Is it because of the number of layoffs? What are some of the reasons why, particularly in the African American community, we're finding so many homes going into foreclosure now?
Well, much of it is because of life-changing situations that occur, but the unemployment rate, as it rises, the number of foreclosed properties rise also. So a lot of it has to do directly with the unemployment rate.
Which we already know in our community is already in double digits and has been in double digits for a while now.
That's correct. So we think that many of the individuals that come into our office seeking assistance, it's really the same thing: lack of enough funds to take care of their mortgage. And again, a lot of it is due to the unemployment.
And also during this housing boom and so forth, when these loans that were made, a lot of them were interest-only loans, and also had higher interest rates, etc. So were people using more of their income to begin with in terms of what they had to put out for housing versus all the other things that they had to be responsible for? Was that line?
I think
changed?
probably one of the major pieces was the message that was being sent out is that we all could become homeowners. It was a matter of finding the right product. And we had really a lot of emphasis on no money down or just a little bit of money down. And so for a lot of African Americans, this was, quote, their opportunity to be able to go into that. But realizing also in terms of the amount of debt that it's going to take for you to be able to balance out your budget. If you put very little down, then you have very little equity. And if you didn't understand what that meant, that was probably the first sign of caution that perhaps you should have had to think that, well, if the value is going to continue to go up, that's great. But if it doesn't, and then I have a hiccup in my situation, I don't have that to go back to refinance, even though my lender has said to me with my high cost loan, I can refinance in 2 years. But what does that really mean? Does it mean that you've been stable with your job, you paid your bills on time, your value's gone up so that when you refinance now you can roll that into the cost of the new loan, not have to come out of pocket? So you really had to ask all those questions. And so if any of those variables changed, then likely you were no longer a candidate. So now you're in that housing bubble that's now burst where the values may be down, your income may be less, maybe you're not working overtime anymore, maybe someone has lost income, a death, an illness, any of those things could have happened to change it.
Is it true that a lot of times also minorities get charged more interest as opposed to maybe someone who maybe has the same type of income and they're pretty equal in terms of income and so forth, but minorities are usually charged a higher interest rate?
We have seen that happen in some cases where they should never have been placed in a subprime product at all. They really qualify for something much
like
better. Exactly, and they find themselves in that because, again, lack of education, not really knowing really what they're signing. It's just that at the end of the day, we get the keys and we can go in and our family, we have a home, and it's wonderful.
Right, right. Okay, let's talk about process for a minute, because when does foreclosure start? I'll start with you first,
When you
Tina.
become delinquent.
So if I'm 1 month late on my mortgage, that foreclosure process has started? In reality,
when you're 1 month late, you are now in default. Yes. So that's the beginning of that process. Okay. So from that point on, either you should be making contact with your lender, or certainly your lender will be making contact with you. What I always tell people is if you know you're going to be late and it's not a temporary one-time only, which you know after 10 or 15 days you're going to get a late fee anyway. So that's your first trigger, that I've got the late fee, before you even get into the 30-day time frame. So you want to start that communication early. You want to start it often. In fact, I have a unique situation now where I have a borrower that's in the middle of refinancing, and the week before closing, he lost his job after 20 years. So we had to stop our side of the process, but what he did, which was very smart, before I even had a chance to tell him, he knew to call his lender and say, I have just lost my job. I've already seen what my benefits are going to be for unemployment. It won't be enough for me to make my budget. What are my options? Well, they have already worked it out with him to put part of that mortgage on the back end of the loan, rework the payment structure. They're now looking for him to sort of stay in contact with him when he's back on his feet. We, on the other hand, have taken 45-day window to say, give us a letter once you have your new employment and 2 pay stubs, and then we'll continue the process for you. So he's been able to work out both ends of it. Had he not done that early and gone into the 60-day process, by now you've gotten not only a call, but you've gotten a letter. And when you're in a 90-day process, by now you've also gotten something that has said it's a legal document, that now it has gone into a lien process where the sheriff may be delivering something to your door. And many people don't want to open that mail. You've got to open the mail.
I was going to say, sometimes
and you've got to make the call.
In a situation like that, and you know things are going bad, and then you just basically want to bury your head in the sand, so to speak. That's probably one of the worst things you can do, isn't it, Yvette?
That is the worst thing you can do. What we try to educate everyone by, and we conduct foreclosure prevention workshops across the cities in Hampton Roads. And one of the things that we want is, just as Tina said, it's important that they contact their lender, to contact a housing counseling, a certified housing counseling agency such as the Urban League, not a rescue scam agency that's charging money like $1,000 and we can save your home. You don't want to contact those types of
I was going to ask you all about this. So is that a scam, or is it just adding more money to a situation where you already are running out of money to begin with?
Exactly. And we've seen cases where someone has spent $1,500, nothing was done, and then they come to us and we work with them for free. And
Wow.
so we advise, for them to contact the HUD counseling, certified counseling agency to assist them. And then once that happens, then we can begin to look at the picture, what's going on, what caused you to be in the situation. And most importantly, don't sit and use the pride factor not to contact anyone, tell someone, because there are lots of things that we can help you with in the beginning. And so when we're able to do that, we can get you educated, work with the lender. Sometimes people aren't comfortable, as savvy as the example that Tina gave, to do it on their own. So we act in their behalf to help them through that situation.
Is it better for lenders to work with people? I mean, what is the attitude?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yes.
You want to be a lender. You don't want to be a real estate holding company. That's not their intent. Their intent is to take in deposits and loan that money back out. So once you make that early communication with them, the first thing they want to find out is, what are your extenuating circumstances and how can we work this out? What alternatives can we look at? So if the borrower knows they're going to be late and this is a long-term or even short-term, let's say for the next 6 months, this is a time, if they didn't look at them before, look at your loan documents. It has a lot of information in terms of what's going to be required when you default, what percentages, what type of late fees are going to be involved, at what point they will start that part of the foreclosure procedure that the train has left the station now, and we're going to put it up for sale and auction and in the newspaper and so forth.
Is there a point of no return where you can't make up the back payment, you can't do whatever you need to do in order to stop the foreclosure completely? And I'll take that from either one of you.
Yes, there are circumstances where the person absolutely cannot afford the home. Sometimes it can be a situation where they have lost their jobs and there is no income for us to negotiate with. There's no way that they can afford it. They may have, and even when the lender tries to work out a deal, they simply cannot afford it. In those situations, then we begin the process of helping them for the transition out of the home. So, and it's not an end all, the life is over type of situation. You can become a homeowner again.
So if you've gone into foreclosure, you can become a homeowner again further on down the line.
Yes, you can.
But if you lose your home, I mean, there are all other kinds of ramifications in terms of not having an address. If you have children to register in school, I mean, what types of things, I guess, should you be thinking of if you find yourself at the point where I guess the sheriff has already come, you've already gotten your notification, you know you're going to be evicted at some point. What do you need to do at that point? Well,
the clients that we work with that they find themselves in that situation, we begin, as I said, working on a transition. Fortunately, the Urban League has a rental housing counselor that we work with a cadre of landlords, because not only now are you out of your home, your credit is pretty much done for the time being. So credit is taken into consideration in rentals. So we help them, we work with the landlords to kind of overlook that and then provide them with a transition into the rental property. And finding out, if they have several children, of course, we need to find a property that can accommodate the family. But again, it's a different situation. But I like to stress that it's not an end all.
There is light at the end.
There is, and then over time you can recover. We find that in our first-time homebuyers classes, we have individuals that were homeowners before that had gone through foreclosure that are now coming to our classes, and the reason for that is now they're becoming an educated buyer, so they'll know what to do the next time.
When you watch mainstream television a lot and you see the stories of people who find themselves taking a loan and somebody wrote in the amount that was more than what they made and so forth, people who find themselves in foreclosure, they make it sound like they're new home buyers who've only owned their homes 2 or 3 years or whatever. But do you find other people who have been long-term homeowners find themselves in trouble?
Yes, we've had individuals that had owned homes for 15, 20 years. And some of that is because what's happened to them is they may have entrusted someone else to help them when they couldn't pay their mortgage, and they've actually signed the deed over to someone else, and so now they're out of their homes. So there are many, many different situations. Time of ownership has nothing to do with it, because even if you own your home for a long period of time, you could have refinanced it into the wrong product.
Into the wrong product from there.
And for different reasons. Keep in mind when people are refinancing and during the boom of equity growing because housing prices were going up, people sort of saw their home sometimes as a cash cow. It was like an ATM, so whatever purpose they needed to use it for. And unfortunately, for people that stayed in their houses for a long period of time, and sometimes in a short time frame, if they're the generous one in their family that goes to help everybody, and that person knows just a little bit more about taking cash out, they may say, we need your help, and this is one way to do it. Maybe take out a second home loan, take out a line of credit, whatever the case may be, and you have to look at, can I afford it each time? And perhaps someone may have said they would help them with it. They're not able to. But that same person that sort of encouraged them to do that, and it wasn't always to fix up the house and do other things. Sometimes it was to help other people out. So that's the good Samaritan side of them. But the other side was on the affordability side. Now that they're going into this transition with the foreclosure, they didn't have anyone to educate them there. They may have been, as Yvette said, too embarrassed to sort of share that information. So you do see that a lot of times, whether it be a professional or a senior person or whomever, people in our industry that are mortgage lenders and realtors are also losing their homes as well. And they know the system, they know the process, but again, you have to put your pride aside. You have to make that call, and I can't stress it enough to say, make it early and make it often, and just kind of, you know, keep letting them know where the situation is changing. I've had people that have had forbearance where they paid interest only on HUD loans because of death in the family, terminal illness. I've had other family members that assumed the other person's loan. So if you start early enough, you can find out what your options are and work through them. But if you wait too late, then it's like you get all or nothing. You have to bring all the money or it's gone.
Or it's done. She gave us some really good stuff. We got about a minute left. What piece of advice would you just, beyond, I know talk to people, but I mean, and talk often, but what else would you tell people to do right now if they're in trouble?
I would tell them if it's a situation where they just can't afford the mortgage, maybe they have an adjustable rate, whatever money you do have, save that. Do not spend it, because having some money is a good negotiating tool when we go to the table with the servicer to negotiate a new deal, a modification or forbearance or whatever the case may be. But many times what we find is people they can't afford it, so they spend the money on something else. So keep whatever you have, and then we can use that to negotiate.
That's interesting. Ladies, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I know there's many things that we could have gone into in terms of what the different options are once you find yourself in foreclosure and all of that. And I would encourage people to go to the Urban League website to find out more information, and
to the HUD website also.
And to the HUD website.
They're actually on Facebook. They're on YouTube now. They're trying to reach people of all entities to just let them know the information is there.
But the bottom line is, call somebody, talk to them, put your pride aside so that you can make things happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was Yvette Young of the Urban League and Tina Lea with State Farm Bank. When we come back, self-defense classes to keep women safe. But first, here's what's happening in Hampton Roads. Welcome back, everybody. Now, here's a question for the women. What would you do if you were walking to your car and someone tried to grab you? Lisa Godley spent some time with Willie Hunter of Tiger Martial Arts and learned some simple ways to protect yourself.
Willie, what are some basic self-defense moves that any woman should know or could learn very easily if she's trying to protect herself?
Okay, a couple things we want to talk about. One is your surroundings. You always want to be aware of what's around you and let people know where you are, where you're going. A couple of things, if you're going to your car, you want to make sure you have your keys out. If you're noticing you're walking to your car, you see someone, you feel uncomfortable, two things you can do. One, you can press your panic button, okay, to get attention. Two, you can have your key that you're driving with already out, so you can have it here. You can use this as a weapon, and it's simple. He grabs me here. Someone grabs you, we naturally want to get them off, so we're going to grab back. Two, keys over, 3, it's a knee. And if you're parking somewhere at night, make sure you try to park in a well-lit area. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to go over, like, if someone was choking you, if someone was grabbing you, how to get away from that. The first thing you want to do is grab back. That's a normal reaction. Here, if he pushes forward, I want to step back. This is going to help my balance here. And then I'm going to kick. Simple thing, kick to the groin. Here, kick. If this doesn't work, you can go to the eyes, right eye gouge. If you have fingernails, eyes, and scratch. Then I want to reach up and I want to turn like I'm trying to run away, but I want to drop my arms down and I want to come across. Here, strike, and then I want to run. Here. Okay, here, I grab, normal reaction, I grab his hands. I step back here for balance. I kick, I turn, I drop down, bring my arm across, elbow, and then I can run to get away. From a grab is another way if someone's grabbing you, so I'm going to grab you. First thing you want to do is you don't want to just try to snatch away. He wants to give me something to think about. So he can go to an eye gouge, very simple. 1, and he could knee, 2, or he could kick. It depends on the range that's given. And then what Mr. Hunter wants to do, he's want to turn his body and bring his hand up to his shoulder, and then he gets away that way. The most important thing, which is the hardest thing, is not to panic. You got to remember, you can hold your breath, but you're gonna. Here, everyone, I don't care who you are, you're going to panic somewhat, but you want to try to regain your composure here. So here, just enough to get away. And remember, here, kick. If this doesn't work, you can go to the eyes, right eye gouge, right here. 1, this is going to loosen this up here. I can snatch away this way. I can palm, I can knee, I can elbow, and then I can go home.
So Barbara, these are just a few simple techniques that you should practice at home so you'll be ready if you ever have to defend yourself.
Now here's a question. Do educators need to take into account a student's cultural background before they can teach them effectively? Dr. James A. Banks says yes. He's known as the founding father of multicultural education, and he was on the campus of William & Mary recently as part of the Hornsby Lecture Series. He sat down with Lisa Godley to talk about multiculturalism and education.
He grew up in the segregated South in the 1950s and 60s. For Dr. James A. Banks, racism wasn't something he heard about. He lived it. As a result, he spent his life trying to find equality and social justice for all people.
My work is very much about my own story and my own life.
His career in education began with a focus on Black studies that soon grew into multi-ethnic studies. Decades later, Dr. Banks is known as one of the pioneers of multicultural education. He travels around the world gathering research and sharing his knowledge with others. On a recent visit to the College of William & Mary, he sat down with us to discuss his life's work. Dr. Banks, why is multicultural education important?
It's very important because our nation and the world is becoming increasingly diverse. By 2043, our nation will be half people of color. And so that it's very important that we help them learn to live together. There is some research to indicate that when students are exposed to content which includes their own history and cultures, their academic achievement will increase. That people want to know about themselves, and that if you include Black content, Black kids tend to be more highly motivated. If you include Mexican American content, the Mexican American students tend to be more highly motivated. So for both achievement reasons and for human relation reasons, multicultural education is needed in our society and within our schools.
Dr. Banks goes on to say that young children are very observant and can see how society looks at different races. So he advocates that multicultural interventions be placed in the curriculum as early as preschool. He also says if we don't intervene, the attitudes of young children of color will become increasingly more negative toward their own race. Do you think the election of President Barack Obama will make the need for multicultural education less essential?
Barack Obama is wonderful, but he can't bring about miracles. And that the racism in our society is very deep, it's very institutionalized, and one Black president can't solve our deep racial problems. There are all kind of wonderful things that will come along with his election, but clearly the elimination of racism is not one of them.
Dr. Banks believes that the nation's first African American president will allow black children to feel more empowered and see more possibilities. But he says we all have to be realistic and realize that President Obama can only do so much because he has to work within a structure. He points to families to play a key role in a child's image of himself and their educational achievements. He says turning off the television, providing a place for the kids to study, and monitoring whether or not they do their homework is critical to a child's academic success. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Please visit our website, anotherview.tv, and sign up for our weekly eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming Another View programs. Or you can send us a note on our blog or write us at 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk, 23508. And we'll see you next week for Another View. Good night, everybody.
Production funding for Another View comes from Hampton's 400th Anniversary Committee and the Hampton Neighborhood Commission, partnering with neighborhoods throughout the city, working hand in hand to create vibrant places we are proud to call home and celebrate. And from the African American Programming Advisory Group, community visionaries assisting WHRO to engage, enlighten, educate, and entertain all communities in Hampton Roads.